LBC 97.3. Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC 973. This is Call Clegg on London's biggest conversation. LBC 97.3.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 7th of November, and I'm Nick Clegg, bringing you Call Clegg on LBC 97.3. So over the next half an hour, you can put any question you want to me. Call on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And of course, you can watch on lbc.co.uk. So let's go to the first caller, Simon. Simon in Redhill. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Deputy Prime Minister.
Hello.
Right, my question is regarding the TPIMs.
Right.
And they're relatively new, but with something that has a 20% failure rate, well, plus 20% failure rate, I was just wondering how much this is actually costing us, and obviously inclusive of the price of fixing the failures that it has, because this is obviously quite a big deal.
Yeah, no, it is a big deal. For those who don't know,
remind everybody why this is so relevant.
There's this guy who was on, it's called TPIM, it's the acronym, who recently absconded, and so it's quite rightly shed a lot of attention on, or focused a lot of attention on, what do we do with this really difficult category of people who we know are dangerous, who we think want to do us harm, but we can't prosecute them in court or deport them. So it's this kind of group of people who just fall between different categories, if you like. We can't get them in court to prosecute, we can't deport them, but we know we want to keep an eye on them. And so what these TPIMs are all about is make sure that they're tagged, that we know where they are, that we know what they're up to, so that they can't do any harm, until we can get them into court or deport them. Now, they replace something called control orders, which was introduced by the Labour government, which didn't work at all. In fact, I think there are over 40 people who had been on control orders then who aren't now, and a fair number of people absconded under control orders. And the courts kept striking down control orders. I'm not sure if you remember this. There was endless battles that the previous government had with the courts. So why we moved to this different system, which has various modifications to it, is to make it more legally secure. We've had far fewer legal challenges to what we're doing, whilst at the same time keeping the country safe. It's a difficult balance to strike. The last government didn't get it right on control orders. We think TPIMs are a better approach, which is going to keep people safe, but also do it in a way that is legally sound. But clearly, we need to now, make sure that where someone has absconded, as they have, that we try and find them as soon as possible.
Simon?
Well, sadly, though, I mean, when you're in a situation with 20% of them, we've only had 9, which isn't a great amount, and two of the fellas have run away. And now we're in a situation where you've got the UK Border Force, the police and MI5 all in search of this one fellow who's popped off yesterday with the harebrained scheme of running around in a burqa. I was talking to Nick the other day, and we were joking that it's a lot like Homeland, but sadly it is. When we're in a situation where TV writers appear to be brighter than our best and brightest espionage people in the country.
Well, look,
it's a sad state of affairs.
Well, look, is it something that we should worry about? Yes. Is it something we should constantly work on? Yes. But as I said, in a society of a rule of law, you can't. If you can't get people into court to prosecute them because for one reason or another you can't present the evidence in open court, and yet you know that there's someone who you're worried about, what do you do about that? You can't, proverbially speaking, bang them up in court. You can't get them onto a plane to deport them, and yet you want to keep an eye on them. That's the kind of the gap we're trying to fill. Now, actually, the TPIMs are the toughest kind of regime I know of anywhere in the developed world in dealing with this very awkward category of characters who, as I say, pose a threat, but we can't get them into court or can't deport them. Yes, you get people absconding. That is, anyone who absconds from these things, of course, that's not ideal. It's certainly happened under control orders, and control orders were riddled with problems because they kept being challenged in the courts, whereas TPIMs aren't.
Final point to you, Simon, on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah,
All
just
right.
to finish off, I mean, we're talking about a guy who has very, very close links to Al-Shabaab, the guys who did this deal in the Westgate
He's only
Centre.
a suspect, so let's be careful what we say. But do carry on with what you're going to say.
Okay.
Do go on,
I mean, it just seems that, we should have a little bit more control over who we're letting into a country in these scenarios.
I think I agree. Just a final point on this, Deputy Prime Minister. You satisfied them with effectively a 20% failure rate for TPIMs?
No, because I'm not satisfied with anything.
Well, you said they're much better than control orders.
Well, they are better than control orders in the...
The difference was geography with control orders, wasn't it?
No,
Deputy
the
Prime
really
Minister?
important thing is that unlike control orders, TPIMs are not constantly being shredded by the courts.
Right.
That's a very big difference. The last Labour government is now, and the Labour Party now somehow pretends that control orders were a watertight system. They weren't at all. In fact, they were legally constantly being undermined, chopped and changed. What we've put in place is something which the courts recognise as something which works. But clearly, as I say, look, I've got to be completely open with you. There is this dilemma. What do you do about people who pose a concern, but for one reason or another, you cannot stand up a prosecution
But surely
in
you
court?
don't allow them back to their home. Because
Sorry?
under a control order, they were dispersed elsewhere in the
But that
country.
made absolutely no difference to this
It has been
abscond.
reported that you, personally, intervened in some form of discussion with the Conservative Party and felt that they should be allowed to return to their geographical area.
Listen, the Conservative Party in its last manifesto was committed to reforming control orders. Both coalition
Wouldn't
parties...
it make sense? If I'm a
Well, can I-
suspected terrorist, I shouldn't be allowed to live in Blackheath, should I? I should have to go and live in Norwich or somewhere.
It made absolutely no difference to whether this guy put on a burqa or not. Let's just, let's give a bit of perspective. This guy went into a mosque, put on a burqa...
The London
got
Mayor
rid-
thinks he
got-
was assisted in some way.
But what has that got to do with where he's moved from one part of the country to
Because
another?
if he's come back to his home area, then obviously you're more likely to be able to recruit assistance. If I'm a terrorist, I want to go back to Blackheath.
I don't think Boris Johnson can at all assert that because of the change from control orders to TPIMs, that's why this guy was able to remove his tag and put a burqa on. As I say, there are a number of people who absconded from the old control order system. So look, any system. Here's the difficult thing. Any system where you can't deport someone or you can't lock somebody up having delivered a prosecution in court means that you're dealing with a certain degree of uncertainty.
And you don't see any geographical... Lastly, you don't see any location issue here. That is to say they should not be able to return to their home area.
I start from a simple principle. If you cannot prosecute someone in court, there are limits to how much you can curtail their freedom. Of course there are. That's the rule of law. It's something we've fought for centuries.
OK, just to stress, of course, the person involved is only a suspect. Ahmed Mohammed has not been convicted of anything, but he is a suspect in many cases. Mr. Clegg.
Sophia in Loughton.
Good morning, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
Hi. I'm a small business owner in Loughton, and I was listening to Nick Ferrari yesterday talking about Ed Miliband's stance on the living wage, not the minimum wage, but the living wage.
Yep.
And he wants to put it up outside of London to £7.65 from the minimum of £6.31.
Yep.
Which is about a 21% increase.
Yep.
I want to know what is your stance on this.
Well, my stance is...
If you're on legislating for it rather than it being voluntary.
I'm not. I'm in favour of it being applied voluntarily because I think, and if you can pay the people you employ a living wage, all the better. I think we should be encouraging people in the public and the private sector, organisations, businesses, large and small, to pay the living wage where they can. But, and here's the thing, not to do so through compulsion in a way which all the evidence shows actually means that more people lose their jobs altogether. And that seems to be the balance we're trying to strike. Now, what we're saying in the coalition government is, yes, of course, we should pay the living wage where we can. I have to say to you, I'm very keen to hear from you, Sophia. I'm slightly sceptical that a one-off payment of £1,000 just for a few months is suddenly going to make everybody pay the living wage when they haven't been able to before, because it doesn't seem to me to necessarily tip the scales in favour of the living wage, which is Ed Miliband's idea. But, of course, the idea of a living wage is a good thing. But what we're trying to do in the coalition government is focus on seeing how the minimum wage, which, as you say, has recently been uprated quite significantly to £6.31, can perhaps be uprated by increasingly large steps in the future, because there's been a bit of a gap between how the minimum wage has been uprated in the past and the prices that people face. And that's why Vince Cable has written to the Low Pay Commission, who set these rules, and said, look, can you look at the case for an accelerated uprating of the minimum wage? And that's something I'm very interested to see whether we can do. What's your own view, Sophia?
My own view is obviously I pay my staff the living wage, but I'm in a fortunate position and they're skilled enough to warrant being paid more than
Do you think it should be made compulsory?
I don't think it should be made compulsory at all, because if it was made compulsory and I was employing people at £6.31, all I would do is either reduce their hours or I would have to get rid of an employee to make up that shortfall. I don't think it feels like the small businesses especially are being hammered every single day, and it's almost like it's our responsibility to have to increase the wages in line with energy prices going up by 10%. I don't think we're under so much pressure.
No, you look. Of course. What kind of business do you do, Sophia? What's your?
We're distributors of bathroom products. So we're a very successful business, but we're successful because we manage our costs very tightly. There's no room for percentages here and percentages there. We have to do the best that we can with the resources that we have.
And of course you do. Look, I mean, I think by the sounds of it, we agree. It's about getting the right balance between giving people obviously decent wages, but doing so in a way that keeps as many people as possible in work. And that's, in a sense, what the whole idea of the minimum wage has always been about. And that's what the role of the Low Pay Commission. They've been set up actually to look at precisely that balance between employment and how much you pay people. I think the role of the government, we've got many roles, of course, but one of the things we should do is always make sure that people, particularly on low and middle incomes, keep more of the money that they earn. I sort of start from a sort of philosophical starting point that it's not for Ed Miliband or anybody else to try and fix everything from some office in Whitehall, that actually you should give people the freedom to choose how to spend more of the money as long as they're given the freedom to keep more of it. And that's why I'm so proud of the fact that one of the biggest things we've achieved in this coalition government, which you will see in your pay packet and all your employees in April, is that as of April next year, no one pays any income tax on the first £10,000 you earn, which means that every basic rate taxpayer, over 20 million basic rate taxpayers in this country, will be £700 better off than they were at the beginning of this Parliament.
All right, thank you for that. Let's move. Sophia, good luck with that bathroom company. Thank you.
Delphine in Oxford. Hello, Delphine.
Hello, Nick, and hello, Nick.
Hello.
My question is, do you think that Islam is being unfairly attacked more than the other religions in view of Ken Clarke's comments recently?
This was when Ken Clarke said, and I'm paraphrasing briefly, but he felt that wearing a veil was almost like living in a bag. Mr. Clegg.
Look, I mean, Ken, I happen to believe, is one of the most sort of moderate and kind of sensible politicians I know. So I'm sure he didn't mean kind of any offence. And actually, he went on to say something that I very much believe myself, is that what people wear in their everyday lives, in their own private lives, in their own communities, in their own homes, is entirely up to them. And we talked about this before. People should be able to wear clothing, jewellery, symbols, whatever, of their own identity, of their faith, of their ethnicity. Got no problem with that at all. The question is simply, what do you do about particularly the full veil in places where you just need to see someone's face? And he was talking about courts, where I think a consultation has now been launched about the circumstances in which the full veil can be required to be removed, so that there's some face-to-face contact in the courtroom. Security, checks in airports seems to be another obvious example. We talked in the past. Do you remember that case in, where was it? Was it in Birmingham? Was it Birmingham? About teachers having the right to be able to sort of, if you like, make face-to-face contact with their students and their pupils. But otherwise, we live in a free country. We're not like France and other countries where government dictates what you can and can't wear. And I know that Ken believes in that. I certainly believe in that. It's getting that balance right.
All right. Thank you for that. Moving on, another call.
Tom in Watford. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Nick. How are you doing this morning?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I've just got a frog in my throat.
Oh. Okay.
My question is, yesterday morning we woke up to find another child dead by a dog, mauled to death by a dog. Now, my question is, how many more children have to die before we bring in tighter dog control?
Well, look, Tom, we are actually bringing in tighter dog control. You remember that case was it in the Wirral some time ago? It was a terrible case of a child being killed by a dog on private property, and we discovered that
this was the little girl, the next door dog.
Correct. Do you remember, Tom, this? And then we looked at it as government, and we realised that actually the law meant that you could have sanctions against dog owners who act dangerously in public, but not on private property. So we're changing the law to tighten that up. But Tom, what do you have in mind? Because it's really
the knee-jerk reaction here is to blame the dog. Like it's a big dog, where it's not. It's irresponsible dog owners or misinformed dog owners.
Yeah.
And this lady had bought this dog from a rescue centre, and clearly they should have known better than to release a dog of that size into such a small property with small children.
Well, look, I certainly agree with you, Tom, that if you're selling a big dog, a big, powerful dog, to a private home, I would have thought you want to have some regard to what you think of the dog owner and the circumstances they live. But what's much more difficult, Tom, is to leap from urging people to be responsible and sensible and just take common sense decisions about the kind of dogs they buy and indeed they sell, from saying that we should legislate to fix that all in a law. How do you? There's a limit to how much you can micromanage every individual decision that people take when they buy pets. That's the problem.
Well, we should put like a line in the sand, say, from this day forward, you must have a dog licence, you must have these controls in place. But
the point the Deputy Prime Minister is making, bear in mind, this was this person's own dog, so it wasn't as if the dog, tragic as it is, of course, and little girl's lost her life, but it wasn't as if the dog sort of was wandering the streets or even came in from next door. I don't think you never want to live in a country where the government decided you couldn't necessarily buy a dog, inappropriate as perhaps the selection was, but no one is feeling that more keenly than the mother, I would imagine, that day, the decision she made on that day to get that dog togged. Thank you, Mr. Clegg. Let's move on.
Next caller is Johnny. Johnny in Brixton. Hello, Johnny.
Yeah, morning. My phone might cut out because I'd like a Samsung Note if Samsung are listening. Can I quickly ask you?
Say it again?
No, let's not. He was touting for a free mobile phone.
Was he? Right.
Let's move on if you could, Johnny. Thank you.
Yeah. How has the recession directly affected you?
Well, not clearly as much as many other people. Both Miriam and I work in well-paid jobs, so clearly we're not in the same position as many people who feel under considerably greater financial pressure.
I don't understand that answer.
Sorry?
I don't understand that answer. I just sort of said, how has it directly affected you? I mean, should we really say that in reality most well-paid MPs, good luck to the lot of you, and millionaires, good luck to you, are not affected by the recession one iota?
Well, John, if you don't mind, I'm not going to start telling you about every single sort of,
Well, you meant to be very open, Mr. Clegg.
Sorry?
You're meant to be a very open politician. I just wondered, how the recession has directly affected you. It either has or it hasn't.
Yeah, and I've explained to you, it hasn't affected, clearly, my family nearly as much as that of many other people.
That hasn't affected you at all. That's fair.
Johnny, forgive me. If you have an answer in mind that you want to impose upon me, by all means say it. But you asked me a question, and I'm giving you the answer in the terms that I want to provide them.
Yes, you're a great politician, you're a great wordsmith, but I'm just trying to get my sort of bit in, because obviously you're going to sway over with your great dialogue. So it's obvious that most politicians aren't affected. That's all. Have a great day, Mr. Clegg.
Thank you, Johnny.
Right, Johnny, thank you for that. It does leave me, and indeed, if I can come in with a question now. You may recall last week, Deputy Prime Minister, I asked you about your heating bill. How much is your quarterly bill?
I'm not going to start going into my own personal bills.
I spend about £128 a month. It goes on direct debit. Is that roughly yours?
Nick, I'm simply...
You see how I did that?
Oh, so clever. I tell you, you're so subtle. I didn't see that coming. I didn't see it coming.
How much is your energy bill?
I'm not going to tell you how much my energy bill is.
I must be courteous. How much is your energy bill, Deputy
I'm not going to tell you.
And you wouldn't, but since then it's been reported that you claim £254.29p for electricity and gas in your constituency home in Sheffield, and this morning we wake up to one newspaper, the Daily Mirror, guess who's paying less to keep his home warm, and there's a picture of the Prime Minister, David Cameron. So can I repeat my question? How much is your bill, and how much was how come you were able to claim £254?
I'm not going to tell you the bill of my own private home that I pay. Because look, I don't live in a government flat in Whitehall or anywhere else. I live in my own home. Miriam and I pay our bills. The moment I start telling you what my energy bills, you can ask me my water bills, how much I pay on eggs or milk.
I promise I won't.
Oh, really? That's a promise I'll believe. That's a promise I'll believe.
I'll give you a journalist's promise.
But on the payment of as you know, we've got this system where because obviously MPs have to work in two places at once, in London in your constituency. My constituency is in South West Sheffield. I rent a flat in South West Sheffield, and the utility costs of renting that flat are part of what is provided to MPs. So that's what I do. I think most people would understand that if you are if you're living and working, if you like, in two different places, and you're given allowances to cover the costs in one of those places, that also covers your utility bills. And I'm totally open about what those bills are, and I've got no embarrassment about explaining to you that situation. If you
Is it appropriate, though, the way people are struggling at the moment to make payments for those energy bills?
Look,
someone who, and credit to you through your education, through your work, you have a few quid in the bank and you're claiming 254 quid off the rest of us.
Well, look, I think what you have to ask yourself is the principal question about, do you think, yes, from the taxpayer, there should be any form of support to the cost that MPs face by living and working in two places at once? Now, the system we have in place, which I support, is that the allowances that MPs get are now not set by MPs. MPs are not judge and jury as they were during the course of the expenses scandal. It's set independently by this body IPSA, and it is set at a way which is considered to be reasonable, funded by the taxpayer, to allow MPs simply to do their job, to represent their constituents, to be in their constituencies every week, but also to serve them in Parliament. Now, if you want to take that away, well, I wouldn't make that case, because I'll tell you what will happen is the only people who ever go into politics will be people who can basically almost afford to do it as a hobby.
Could make the argument we have some of those now.
Well, you could argue that's the case, but I think it would be very unhealthy for British politics if we turn the clock back and it only becomes a gentleman's sport, if you like, a hobby for the landed gentry. That's frankly turning the clock back 150 years. I think in the private and public sector, if you have costs associated with your work, where you have two offices and where you have to be every week in two places, if you like, at once, that some form of support through allowances is given to you to do that.
What about £6,000, as one MP claimed? Nearly 6,000. Thick end.
I can only account for my own.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? £6,000.
I don't know who that is. And
it's Nadeem Zahawi. He's Conservative
MP. He just needs to explain his own bills. He said mine are whatever you said it was, 200 quid or so.
Okay. Well, you won't tell me your water bill. You won't tell me your heating bill. Graham from Bushy says the profits at Marks and Spencer's have gone down again this week, mainly due to middle-aged shoppers shunning their clothing. Does Mrs. Clegg still buy your underwear from Marks and Spencer's? Has she too gone elsewhere? And what did you last buy for Miriam from Marks and Sparks? Right, Graham is always on the money.
I will admit to one thing in that question, which is that I am a keen buyer of garments,
undergarments,
often not visible to the eye from Marks and Spencer. I haven't been for years, but I take slight offence on behalf of Miriam the idea that Miriam goes and buys those things for me. So that's a very old-fashioned view of. I can guarantee you, Miriam does not buy my underwear, and I would never even dare suggest.
What did you last buy from Mrs. Clegg from Marks and Spencer's?
Well, as I say, I buy my own clothes from Marks and Spencer.
Did you buy her any? Because female fashion is not performing as it should.
And I very rarely try to second guess the fashion selection that
all right.
Miriam indeed. No, but I buy, of course I buy my own clothes.
Lastly then, you're not going to thank me for this. What's a pack of 3 men's briefs at Marks and Spencer? How much does it cost?
I think they probably come in very different shapes and sizes at very different prices.
Broadly, how much money will you take for a pack? Well, you buy your own briefs, so how much would you have to give for a pack of 3?
I can't remember what a pack of 3 is. I honestly, sorry, can't remember. I'm
going to say 9 quid. Find out.
How much?
See.
How much is
I'm going to say 9. So you're going to come up with you don't even want to go there.
No.
Probably wise. That's why you do what I...
A tenner.
Let's go to other calls and questions.
David in St Albans.
Oh, good morning, Nick. Do you think that it's fair that if a married couple that share the household chores, and do you do your duty?
So sorry, say that again.
What's the question directly, David? Do you think?
Well, the question is, do you think it's fair that a married couple shares a household chores? And you do your share.
This is the story that came out earlier this week, that increasingly women have been sold a pup, in that they not only they have to do the work and they come back into the workplace, but when they go home they do the majority of the housework as well, the hoovering, the washing and the ironing. So, David, I think what you're getting at, what chores does Mr. Clegg join in? Is that what we're driving at, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, so right, what chores are you get? What's left to you?
I think if I was honest, I think I'm very good and diligent and dutiful at doing things with the kids, whether it's getting them dressed, helping to get them breakfast, helping them with their homework and all the rest of it.
How did trick or treat go?
How did trick or treat go? It was good. It was good. Thank you. I scared a few people on the doorstep.
Imagine opening the door and there's the Deputy Prime Minister.
I hung back discreetly while my children jumped up and down their costumes.
So you're not necessarily the king of the ironing.
But I'm not going to pretend, and I don't think I think Miriam would probably hit the phones immediately if I claimed otherwise, that I'm somehow that it's 50-50 on a lot of the household chores. So I think, David, I think a lot of women would recognise the what you said, that they work incredibly hard in the workplace and then go home and do, frankly, more than their fair share at home as well. And I think it's right, frankly, that us men are put under more pressure to share the burden more evenly.
Although I say the roles were reversed at Charing Cross Station yesterday, because you and your wife went down to help boost the Royal Legion, but no one would know you were there selling copies from the papers, Deputy Prime Minister, because your wife has made every paper and you've made none.
I haven't seen the papers yet, but have I been cropped out again?
Every single one. I've been looking through while we've been chatting. Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Have I been airbrushed out entirely?
You weren't even there. It was all down to Miriam. I'm trying to get another picture.
All right,
How did you get on at Charing Cross? Did you take lots of money?
Well, fine, but clearly I wasn't there, was it? How should I know?
I'm trying to find one of those pictures. You take a call and I'll come up with one of.
Terry in Orpington. Terry.
Oh, hello, Nick.
Hello.
Nick, you probably remember back in 2007, 6 years ago, that the National Probation Service celebrated its centenary, and there was a service at Westminster Abbey, and you actually spoke. You spoke very highly of the service, saying what a great job it was doing, and that is true, because it's been meeting all of its targets to reduce reoffending that the government has set, meeting all efficiencies. In 2011, it was recognised by the British Quality Foundation as a very high calibre service, and it actually got a gold medal for excellence.
Are you a probation officer, Terry?
I am.
Yeah.
The only public service. Yeah, I am a probation officer in London.
In London, right, yeah.
And I'm quite alarmed that the present government are going ahead with their plans to privatise most of the probation service. And
so directly, what would your question be to the Deputy Prime Minister then,
my
Terry?
question is, why, when the service is performing well, why on earth bringing all these changes that haven't been piloted, haven't been tested, and if it all goes through, we're likely in a year's time to end up with companies like Serco, G4S, Sodexo running much of our probation service.
Terry, for those who aren't as close to this as you are, I think it's just worth sort of explaining. Firstly, of course I pay tribute to you and the thousands of probation officers up and down the country who, as you say, do a very good job at making sure that people who come out of prison don't reoffend, that people's lives are turned around, and that the public is kept safe. And I've spoken to many probation officers in South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, where I'm an MP, and they are incredibly committed to their job, and in many respects they embody the best of public service. But here's the big but. Doesn't mean that everything's perfect. Doesn't mean that every probation service is doing as well as it can. And here's the thing, Terry, I know you might not welcome this, and it doesn't mean necessarily that there aren't other organisations, and you know as well as I do, there are lots of really good voluntary organisations, non-profit organisations, and yes, in private organisations as well, who've got some really innovative ideas about the way in which we can keep offenders, if you like, on the straight and narrow, and help people to help turn people's lives around, so we have less crime. And as you know, that the idea behind the legislation is to keep the public probation service fully in control of high-risk offenders, but for the lower-risk offenders, I know there's a complicated debate about exactly how you demarcate one from the other, but the lower-risk offenders, that we allow other organisations in who have got a real commitment to making sure that they make sure that those low-risk offenders don't become repeat offenders, and that they get the kind of support they need to turn their lives around. That's the kind of philosophy in all of this. I know it's not welcome to a number of probation officers who feel that the system as it is now should be not changed at all. I don't agree with that. I don't think a system is always perfect, and I think it can be improved. And as I say, the public probation service will remain fully in control of the high-risk offenders in the system.
We've got time for a couple more questions. One we took earlier. Someone recorded a question. We were talking, it's in the light of the story today, Deputy Prime Minister, the population of Britain will soar by 10 million in just 25 years. It's predicted that by 2037 we'll have a population of 73.3 million. Roy from Brookman's Park left this question for you.
Mr. Clegg, how many people would you allow in this country? When would you say stop? 80 million, 90 million or 100 million? And please give me a straight answer, yes, no, or 100 million.
My answer, I'm afraid, is going to be no. I'm not going to give Roy a figure, because I don't think you can just pluck a figure out of the air. The complexity about all of this, because there are a lot of people who leave this country as well as come in. In fact, one of the reasons why the net immigration figures went up slightly in the last published statistics was there was an increase in the number of people who were leaving Britain. So people do move in and out of our country a great deal. We need to make sure, and I've talked about this so many times on this programme because people are quite rightly anxious about this, we need to make sure that our immigration system is welcoming to people who want to come and make a contribution to this country, grow the economy, support our public services and so on, and live and abide by the rules in our country. But we need to stamp out abuse, stamp out loopholes, stamp out illegality, and make sure that we know who's coming in and out of this country. Because still at the moment, because previous governments have removed exit checks and they haven't yet been fully restored by the Home Office, we don't yet fully have a system up and running, which we must have in the years to come, about who's coming in and who's going out.
Final question is, I think you've got a note, is it Gary in Bristol?
Gary, hello, Gary in Bristol.
Hello, just a question. I want your opinion. Is that okay?
Yes.
Hello?
No, yeah, that's the idea about... Yeah, absolutely.
Right, what it is, at the moment, we're due to have a general election in 2015. Okay?
Yes.
And maybe you might win, or Labour. Over the last century or so, if you look back, you'll see governments have changed.
Yes.
You're always getting the system where a government puts something in, next government comes in, and they stop it. It holds Britain's progress back.
Yes.
Shouldn't we actually stop the general election system and have each constituency with an equal amount of the three main parties' MPs, and it carries on like that all the time, with MP being voted in and he stays there for 20 years, and then the only things that change are the MPs. So you have a permanent coalition, and it should stop governments coming in and stopping what the previous government has done, good or bad.
Gary, I think particularly for opponents of this coalition, the idea of permanent coalition is going to send them into paroxysms of rage and despair. Yeah, oh gosh, heaven knows what Jeremy Pax would have to say about that one.
Absolutely.
But look, no, Gary, I don't agree that we should eliminate choice, eliminate debate, eliminate the kind of argy-bargy of politics. Unattractive though it might seem at times, and of course imperfect though our democracy is, actually at the end of the day it's the best way in which we can have people articulating conflicting views about the future and resolve them peacefully, and then govern the country as well as we possibly can on behalf of the people in a way which is legitimate, because it's backed by whatever happens in elections. So I don't agree with you that the country would be well served by just kind of getting rid of choice and imposing, if you like, some permanent government on people. Where I do actually agree with some of what you say is that there are certain issues where it would be better for the country, frankly, if all parties didn't play party politics with them, because there are some very big issues which just stretch across several parliaments, where you just need people to kind of say, right, we're going to just do this as a country, who, regardless of the shifting cast of characters who move in and out of government. A very good recent example is HS2. It's this massive, huge project. I passionately believe in it. It was first started by Labour. The Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives now believe in it. Guess what happens? Labour go into opposition and they start playing party politics with it. That's a classic example of where you don't want short-term party politics to mess up the long-term benefits to the country from a big project like that.
And lastly, just on a related theme from me, Jeremy Paxman admitted not voting at a recent election, despite criticising Russell Brand for doing the same. He finds political parties unappetising and is tired of tawdry pretences. You should vote, shouldn't you?
Of course you should vote. I mean,
what
look,
do you make of Jeremy Paxman?
Well, I don't know. Look, here's a guy who's, what does he get paid? £1 million or thereabouts, paid for by taxpayers. He lives off politics and he spends all his time sneering at politics. And do you know what? Politics is imperfect. Gary and I were just talking about it. But at the end of the day, it is the way that we decide how you pay your taxes, how we support our hospitals, our schools, whether we go into war or not, how we deal with climate change. And of course, it's sometimes unedifying. But this idea that you just can sort of sneer at the whole thing, dismiss everybody as somehow being sort of rogues and charlatans, and say, well, therefore I'm going to wash my hands of the whole thing, I think is a total abdication of responsibility. You know, at the end of the day, I've just had this old-fashioned view, if you want to improve something, get stuck in and get your hands dirty and change it. Don't somehow pretend that you can turn your back on it.
Deputy Prime Minister, I need to tell you, a pack of 3 pure cotton plain briefs from Marks and Spencer's costs £8. So
so I was £2 out and you were £1.
I was £1. On that bombshell, Call Clegg comes to an end. We look forward to seeing you on the same time. You're listening to LBC 97.3, 9:34. Here is the news.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg